So it's the Eastern Neighbors Democratic Club along with the Willie B. Kennedy Democratic Club. And Linda's going to introduce their club in a moment, along with United Democratic Club. We got Bob back here. And then we've got Lily from the Alice B. Toklas Democratic Club. So thank you all for being here tonight. And I just really want to thank all of you who've, there's so many priorities and commitments that everybody has, but the topic is so important that you've, carved out the time to be here tonight to join us. We're blessed to have a group of experts up here that are our panelists and our moderator. We're going to have introductions later, but I want to thank our moderator and our panelists for being here tonight. Thank you very much. And also I want to thank our planning committee. We've been working together for the last 8 weeks and spending like once a week going through, okay, how are we going to put this together? What's the objectives and goals? How are we going to do all the logistics and so on and so on? And they've been amazing. I just want to read their names now because if I do it at the end, I won't be able to really thank them well. From the United Democratic Club, Michael Santos, Abby Fay, Michael Lauer. From the Willie B. Kennedy Club, Linda Richardson, Mauli Kebenyo from Alice B. Toklas, and from our club, the Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club, Megan Mitchell, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, Latoya Pitcher, who's in the back, Anya Bektemba, and Anna Paula Floyd. So they worked really hard putting this together. And I don't want to go without saying, I want to thank the San Francisco Library for making this venue available for us. This is an amazing venue. We've been working with them and really are blessed to have the opportunity to be here. So with that, so we're hosting this reparations forum, and I've actually, many of us have had questions around, so why are you doing a reparations forum? You're a Democratic club. And what we try to do when we organize, we try to look at the issues that are emerging issues that are in the community discussion, in the civic discussion, and in the political discussion. Things that are front and center, things that are getting headlines, because the most important thing to us is to make sure that all our members are informed, that we're informed, and other people in the community in general are informed. So, we go back in time a little bit, and earlier this year, there was a set of recommendations from the San Francisco Reparations Advisory Committee. There was kind of a preliminary set of recommendations that came out first quarter of 2023. And what did that do? There's always a news cycle that follows. And that news cycle is just full of headlines and a lot of, how do we get as many clicks as possible? So, that because they're trying to get people interested, trying to get people to read the articles. And so people walk away with a bit of information. So there was a lot of information that came out in the first quarter of this year. My friends across the country, I started getting phone calls from people, hey, what's this reparations thing? And what's this, $5 million thing? And what's this thing? And so I said, well, hey, honestly, I don't know a lot of the detail. I know there's a pretty big, complex package that's being put together. We need to learn more. So then in the end of June, there was a set of recommendations that came out of the California Reparations Task Force. And there was a set of final recommendations that came from the San Francisco Reparations Advisory Committee. Those came out June 30th, and again, the news cycle started again, and there were a lot of headlines and a lot of buzz, a lot of discussion, and then it kind of got quiet. 2 weeks ago, September 19th, there was a Board of Supervisors hearing on reparations. And again, there was a rally, there was a hearing, there was a news cycle that came after that, and again, front and center in the media, and a lot of people talking about it. So based upon that, we as an Eastern Neighbors Democratic Club, along with our friends, and I reached out to the other 3 Democratic clubs. They said, oh my God, that would be amazing if we could do that, because what we want people to do is be informed. There's a lot of folks from whatever topic it is, whatever topics out there. There's people that are supportive, there's people that are not supportive, there's people that are kind of in between because they don't really know enough about it. And I would just ask everybody here, what's your confidence level of understanding the level of recommendations and what the full package is from a San Francisco Reparations Advisory Committee, what was in the recommendations. By the way, I'll give you a hint, there were 119 recommendations. And then there's a set of recommendations that came from the California Reparations Task Force. And I kind of ask everybody here, who feels that they're really fully informed on that could, make their, their perspective and at least, be able to move forward. So raise the hands, everybody who feels like they're fully locked in on all that. Okay. Notice how my hand didn't go up either. So I'm with the rest of you who had your hands down because I'm here tonight to learn more about this whole package. And our objective and goal from the 4 clubs when we got together right at the beginning is, what are we trying to accomplish? We want to make sure that everybody who engages in this has as much information as possible, to be informed as possible. So at the end of tonight, we can all say, yeah, I may not know all of it, but I got a real better understanding. So that's what we're here for today. So again, I want to thank you all. Again, I want to thank the moderator and our panelists. And I'm just going to give you, the 4 clubs are just going to introduce themselves really briefly. I'm going to start with the Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club. Our mission and vision is to provide a democratic political voice to advocate for an urbanist equity platform, a focus on creating complete communities to keep current residents and families in San Francisco while welcoming newcomers. We will speak with a strong and unified voice focused on issues related to the environment, public safety, affordable housing, transportation, education, open space, workforce opportunities, small business, and social justice. We will primarily concentrate our efforts, our organizing in the eastern neighborhoods of San Francisco, which we define as districts 3, 6, and 10, and endorse candidates and propositions which support the platform and values of our club. And we organize at the intersection of community building and local politics. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Linda Fedicki of Richardson, and I am the chair of the Political Action Committee of the Willie B. Kennedy Democratic Club, based in the Bayview District of San Francisco. And Willie B. Kennedy has consistently been part of the coalition with ENDC and all the other organizations that are here to help to elevate the discussion on all the pertinent issues that affect San Franciscans. We have done that right now. We do ballot, we do voter registration, and we are diversity and equity and inclusion, and we support candidates. I want to take this opportunity because there are many people here to thank Mr. Bruce Agid. He is an asset in San Francisco. He has made it a passion of himself to collate and bring people together. Is the reason why we are here. All the organizations represented here today, we reached the entire San Francisco. We have the infrastructure that this is a forum here tonight, but we are constantly educated. We have on our list, we cover the entire San Francisco. The Willie B. Kennedy, the late Mrs. Kennedy, was an African-American woman, one of the longest running supervisors in San Francisco. She was known to reach out across the aisle to the entire city and county. She had relationship with the Jewish community, with the Latino community, with Asian, with the LGBT, everyone. When she passed away, Willie B. Kennedy was created to continue in her legacy. And that's why we are here today. You are going to see us when the issues are pertinent and important, like reparations today. And you are going to be dealing with the finest of the finest, because the panelists here today are on the top notch of their careers and policy making. And we just want to reach out to you, Mr. Eric Manola, because we are here to help you. Okay, this is the first forum. Consider us as your ally as we continue to educate San Franciscans. I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce the next speaker. Is one and only Mr. Bobak S. Pendieri of United Democratic Club, another wonderful organization that is the mover and shaker in San Francisco. Mr. S. Pendieri, please come to the podium. Thank you.
Hi folks, I'll keep this brief because you didn't come here to hear from me, you came here to hear from all of them. Just a real quick primer on the United Dems. We are the United Democratic Club. We're a pragmatic group of Democrats that prioritize long-term sustainability and progress towards a greater good for all San Franciscans. We prioritize civic engagement and volunteerism in our programming, and we frankly have pretty steep requirements to become a full-blown voting member, and those requirements include showing up to civic engagement events, philanthropic events, and learning and discussion events like this one. If you want to learn more about our club, you can go to uniteddems.org. And the only thing I'm going to plug is if you want to meet our fellow members and come and get more involved, we are having a social on the 19th at Biergarten, that's in Hayes Valley. And we're also going to be happy to host people who are going to be running for the leadership of the San Francisco Democratic Party at that social. And then aside from that, we also have another event coming up this Wednesday about the overlapping challenges of substance abuse, mental health, and homelessness here in the city. You can learn about all of our events and more at uniteddems.org. You can also see our events on our Facebook page. And all I'll say with respect to this event tonight is I am one of those people that did not have my hand raised. I've only really read the headlines. And I want to learn a lot more about it tonight, and I'm really excited to learn more from this wonderful group of panelists. And United Dems, as always, is honored to partner with our great friends and allies at William Kennedy Democratic Club, ENDC, Eastern Neighborhoods Democratic Club, and Alice Mitopoulos LGBTQ Democratic Club. Without further ado, I did not check to see who I'm actually introducing next, and that would be Alice, my friend Mawuli Tibenyo.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mawuli Tibenyo from the Alice Mitopoulos LGBTQ Democratic Club. My co-chair, Iolanda Pena, unfortunately is not able to make it here this evening with me, but she sends her regards. So first, thank you to the library and Michael Lambert, our city librarian, for hosting us. Alice Mitopoulos is the oldest Democratic club in San Francisco. We are dedicated to advocating for human rights, social and economic justice, and equality for all persons, but especially for the LGBTQ community. A few years ago, Alice developed a number of policy planks on everything from racial equity and homelessness, housing, and economic justice. And this program this evening is directly in line with our positions on those issues. So if you want to learn more about Alice, you can go to alicebtopoulos.org. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce our moderator for the evening and to let you all get to what you came here for. Mr. Otis Taylor Jr. Is KQED's managing editor of news. Part of his focus is on the role of systemic inequity in journalism, working with reporters and senior editors to bring a cultural competency to story conception, production, and editing with the goal of reframing the station's coverage of the Bay Area's diverse communities. Through editing and reporting on topics such as reparations and extremism, he is committed to presenting a historically accurate portrait of California's past and present. Previously, he was a columnist with the San Francisco Chronicle and an investigative reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. While at the Chronicle, Taylor extensively covered housing, policing, immigration, race, and inequality. For that work, he received the 2020 Journalist of the Year Award from the NorCal chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. Taylor is from South Carolina and spent more than a decade at the state newspaper as a reporter. And I think he's the perfect moderator for our discussion this evening. So without further ado, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Good morning, all. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to introduce the folks to my left. And if you notice, while the Democratic clubs were introducing themselves, the four of us were up here writing away, looking through notes, preparing. So when you hear or see people dismissing reparations and they're not note-taking, that's the person you don't pay attention to, okay? Because this is about acquired knowledge and continual pursuit of knowledge. We don't know everything, and I'm going to introduce you to Donald K. Tamaki, Senior Counsel at Manami Tamaki LLP, BA, JD Berkeley. He served as, come on now. Y'all trying to go to the ACC where Clemson is. He has served as Executive Director of the Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco. And in the 1980s, he served on a legal team that reopened the landmark 1944 Supreme Court case of Fred Korematsu. Do y'all know? Thank you. Bay Area history, you should know. Overturning Korematsu's criminal conviction for defying incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans. This country imprisoned its own citizens because of racism. In 2021, he was appointed by Governor Newsom to the California Reparations Task Force, and now he's on stage with me. We got a report because this is the second time we've done this. Next, my man Eric McDonald, who, let's say he doesn't mince his words. When Eric gets fired up, if you watched any of Board of Supervisors meetings, I think it was around December? Yes, see? He knows. We'll get to that, But Eric is a people-first advocate, strategist, and diversity trainer, executive coach, and keynote speaker. He does it all. San Francisco native with 25 years of executive management and leadership experience. In his past life, Eric served as chair of the 2011 SF Redistricting Task Force, and he also served 2013 to 2021 on a commission of SF Recreation and Parks Department. In his current role, Eric is serving as the chair for the San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee. That is important work. And this guy on the left, first time I've met him in person, but Lord, have we had some conversations on the phone. We get into it. When I was at the Chronicle, I often called on James Taylor to tell me what was going on. He's a professor of politics at USF, and he's also on the Reparations Advisory Committee in San Francisco. So with that, we're going to do some television, and then we're going to get to the talk.
If day in and day out, you are told repeatedly, you're not a human being, you are not intelligent, you are not beautiful, you don't know how to raise your children, you're a criminal, the list goes on and on. If you're getting steady doses of that, even the best black family is going to struggle to offset those messages.
Fight, stand, push, kick, punch, move,
On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered, and that triggered the largest protest in U.S. history. By September of 2020, the legislature acted to pass Shirley Weber's bill creating the California Task Force. We had 3 goals that we had to do. One was to document the harm, of enslavement, Jim Crow, exclusion, and connect the dots between that and today's consequences. Second thing is to find ways to educate the American public over this history that's really been erased. The third requirement is to make recommendations.
We're really a study group to come up with recommendations to give to the legislature. Then we'll hopefully pass that on to the governor. Hopefully the governor will sign it.
On June 1st, 2022, the California Reparations Task Force issued its nearly 500-page interim report to the state legislature.
The report lays out the deep history of extraordinary racism and exclusion that African Americans have faced since day one in this state.
You will read some things in here that you would thought that only happened in the South. That chattel slavery and the aftermath of the Jim Crow, redlining, all of that just moved west.
The fact of the matter is, the American public knows little about it.
The disparities in outcomes that we're seeing in terms of wealth, health, education, access are not about anything that Black people did wrong, but it's about a system that has actually been designed to keep Black people at the bottom.
The task force uses the international law definition of reparations, which consists of 5 forms.
It's about how do you restore the victim group to a position before the harm was done. So compensation is one of those forms, so cash payments or money. Second form is rehabilitation, free health care, free social services, free legal services, for instance. Restitution is the third form of reparations, so stolen land, stolen property, real or intellectual. The fourth form of reparations is satisfaction. And that really gets some more symbolic forms of reparations, like a formal apology or the taking down of Confederate monuments in this country, similar to denazification in Germany. And then lastly, the fifth form of reparations under international law is guarantees of non-repetition. So that gets at more structural and institutional policy change.
We have the interim report organized principally around 12 areas. And so we're focusing the kind of financial compensation around 5 out of the 12.
The effects of enslavement and post-enslavement, Jim Crow, lack of civil rights, the impact of all of those things on the Black psyche are multiple. I was born before the Civil Rights Act. I'm originally from Charleston, South Carolina. My grandfather was a sharecropper. My mother picked cotton growing up. My parents relocated, part of that Great Migration. Both had stories about racism, like the burning of a Ku Klux Klan cross on the front lawn of my grandparents' friend's home, which is right next door. Heartbreaking stories of my grandfather with other men in the town going to cut down Black bodies that were lynched. Of people being run out of town because of potential lynching.
At the turn of the century, 1900, there were more African American institutions of higher learning than any other group in the country. Understanding what made that possible after slavery and the promise of, reparations that wasn't fulfilled, so they had to find a way of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps on their own, developing this.
I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. My uncle was one of the Little Rock Nine, 9 kids that integrated Central High School in 1957. Yeah, all the atrocities they went through, hundreds of angry white Ku Klux Klan people coming after them. I've had no problems with my education because of the sacrifices that those 9 brave black kids did to get into high school. In a lot of ways, my past experience has led me to this work.
I first became conscious of this evil of race and its effects when at the age of 14, that magazine, it had that horrifying image of Emmett Till. And I was so shaken by it that I ran to Mr. Mega Wiley Evers, field director of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in my state of Mississippi. He said to me, Amos, I understand how hurt you are, but don't just be angry. Let's be smart so that you would be able to fight this evil of race and injustice.
My consciousness was raised fairly early on with a case called the Central Park Five because of the arrests, prosecution, and wrongful imprisonment. I began thinking very critically, especially having 4 older brothers, how Black youth was being criminalized. That's the lived experience that I've carried with me in the work of systems change, racial justice, and social justice.
My grandfather had the only black barbershop in the town that they grew up in, and the only black cab company. And my grandmother owned the only black beauty shop. So understanding how segregation worked, just hearing those stories, hearing, what they had to overcome in order to survive, but at the same time, looking today and seeing where are those black businesses today.
In California, cities like San Francisco, with affirmative action programs in place, are coping with a new Supreme Court action essentially upholding Proposition 209. The measure, passed by 54% of voters, outlaws state and local government affirmative action programs.
Call myself a Prop 209 baby. My parents were running a proficient professional construction business, and then Prop 209 was passed, and because the mandate left for companies to have to do business with Black-owned companies, my father started to struggle in his business. And so that's part of why I'm so passionate about reparations and just equity and making sure that we're fair, especially here in California.
I lived in a housing project. Mind you, both of my parents were college educated, but because of racism, they could not really thrive professionally.
Learning about all the medical experimentations that were conducted on slaves and even after slavery on black men and women, and all the experimentation that happened to them simply because of the race. Operations that are now standard practice were done on blacks, on slaves, on free folks, on their corpses.
The idea of being racialized in the United States is closely tied to one's economic and class-based experience. I have seen a lot of those same, issues and instances and experiences in African American communities.
I thought I knew something about American history. I thought I was pretty well read after working on this near 500-page interim report, which traces and connects the dots between 246 years of enslavement, 90 years of Jim Crow, and decades of exclusion to follow. Was I knew next to nothing, frankly. And despite the fact that black people in their struggle really opened the door for women, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, and all other historically disfavored groups. And so we owe a debt to make it right and change that dynamic going forward.
This process that we have engaged is the roadmap for doing reparations, whether we want to do it at the hyperlocal level or whether we want to do it at the federal level. California's reparations process will be a beacon for this work going forward.
So, just so we're clear, enslavement set in place the conditions that black people exist under today. Enslavement to Jim Crow, to separate but equal, to racist housing policy, to racist lending practices, to mass incarceration. I could go on. But I just want to set the baseline for this discussion. I want to have real talk with people who are interested in American history. I do not believe that American history should be controversial. These events happened, they're recorded, and they're still happening. But I want to hear from you too. So Anya, my homie in the back, has index cards and pencils, and yeah, write some questions down. They'll collect them, and we'll send them up here to talk. Don, I'm going to start with you. 1,000 pages. That's what the California Reparations Task Force published, with 115 recommendations for what? What was that report? What were those recommendations? Because it seems that the people who want to challenge don't even know what they're talking about.
Well, first, before I explain that, I want to give a shout out to Otis Tigler and KQED, because the amount of resources that that station has deployed on reparations, the team must be at least a half a dozen people. And so if you Google KQED reparations, you just saw one 12-minute mini documentary. There are, I think, a total of 5 of them, actually, plus a website full of information to educate the American public. And I don't know of any other news resource that has committed so much effort in that. And the production values are excellent, and I think it'll go a long way to move the needle of public opinion. So shout out to KQED, and thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be on the same panel with Eric and Professor Taylor. So Professor Taylor, I've seen him many times on news shows, so it's nice to meet you in person. Without repeating what you saw on the video in terms of the origins of the California State Task Force and its 2-year journey to create this monumental, groundbreaking 1,100-page report, let me just say that the whole effort was designed, and I'm preaching to the choir here, so I'm not going to recite history that you all know, but the effort really was to rebut the typical responses, criticisms of reparations that you just mentioned, Otis, And typically, there are 5 or 6 or more, and they're variations of the same themes, but they seem to be fall in the same bucket. It's too late. Slavery happened a long time ago. It's over. Neither enslavers nor enslaved people are alive today. Get over it. It's too much. It's unaffordable. You know, sorry it happened, but government can't do anything about it. Third thing is it's unwarranted. Mainly, you know, this is a land of opportunity. If you can't make it, you're on downfall. Another one is unfair to today's taxpayers. I was not an enslaver. I didn't discriminate against anybody. Why should we all be saddled with this? And then there's the what about. What about other groups that have suffered historical discrimination or exclusion or misfortune or other things? If we focus, you know, if we provide reparations to African Americans, what about these other groups? And there are reasonable answers to all of them. And without going into great detail, the 1,100-page report, and I'm sure the San Francisco report, covers these things. The too late argument is that this is not just about slavery. It started in 1619, but the bias and the hate has morphed into one form or another that Otis recited. The too much argument is that there's been so much, this basically is a societal debt, and the amount of wealth that has been extracted over 400 years is enormous. And so the too much argument, yes, it's expensive. And the California Reparations Task Force hired 4 economists to crunch some numbers, and San Francisco did the same. And I think both of our entities believe America needs to know the economic harm that has been done. And so just to shine a light on that, it's a big number, but the idea here is to get the governmental entities, our focus is the state, to propose a plan spanning years in good budgets and bad, good times and bad, to begin to unpack and deal with these proposals one by one, and make it basically a permanent part of the budget. And so it's not a one and done. The harm was long in the making. The repair has to be long in the implementation. Unfair to today's taxpayers. We will argue, and our 1,100-page report argues, that this is a societal debt. Not only did the entire nation benefit, but modern society, San Francisco, the Bay region benefits. You know, the freeways, BART, the destruction of the Fillmore, the removal of people in Russell City and Hayward, all to make way for commercial developments and other transit and other things that enhance the wealth and the productivity of the entire region. More often than not, was born on the backs of one particular group, African American. One study, 2007, showed there were 2,332 eminent domain projects in the United States, resulting in 991 condemnation nationwide, displacing over 1 million people, 2/3 of whom were African American. So these statistics are borne out, footnoted, with authoritative research done in the report. So the idea that it's unfair is really, to today's taxpayers, this is a collective debt. Just as any other societal debt, whether it's from wars, natural catastrophes, human-caused wrongs like pollution, Superfund sites, like entitlement, Social Security, education. I could make an argument that I don't have kids in public schools anymore. So why should I pay for somebody else's kid? Reason, this is a collective debt. The what about argument presumes that, this is a zero-sum game, that if you can't solve everybody's problems, so you should solve none of the problems. And so we would say that we need to open some doors here. And not only that, reparations was promised as part of the, Civil War, pre-Civil War was talked about during, after the Civil War, prior to Lincoln's assassination. And that promise has never been fulfilled. And so if you look at, the metrics of everything category that matters in California, there's two groups on the bottom, Black people and Native people. And so at least we should begin to unpack that process and solve one and then solve the other. I think that's a position of the California Task Force. So I'm gonna stop here, but that's basically the goal of the report.
Thank you for that. Tonight we're going to get to some numbers. I don't know, 5 million, 1.2 million. We'll get some numbers, but I have a question for you, Eric. But first, I want to ask you, what is the answer? What is the number? What percentage of San Franciscans are Black?
Today, this week, it's about 5.5%.
5.5%, okay. Here in San Francisco, you mentioned the Fillmore. It was a neighborhood known as the Harlem of the West, right? His hometown. And it was known as that because of the large number of Black businesses and entertainment venues in the area. But guess what happened to it? Exactly. Redevelopment, urban renewal. Over 10,000 people just moved. 5,000 homes destroyed. Even low rent housing units destroyed. How much wealth do you think was taken from Black people by doing that? That is the history here, and that's what reparations is about. Eric, I briefly mentioned that you got fired up when the media, not KQED, but the media, because we chose not to play that ball game, right? But the media latched on to a $5 million figure per resident, Black resident, and this man got fired up, and I appreciated him so much because why shouldn't people be compensated from what you took from them? We're talking about generational wealth. Houses, passing down houses. That is how you accumulate wealth in this country. So what happens when you take my house from me and don't give it back to me? Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's happening in East Oakland right now. It is ongoing. But Eric, I want to go back to San Francisco. You showed such passion there. Talk about this, working on this effort, being from San Francisco and knowing the harm that it's created.
Thanks, Otis. Just a quick thank you shout out again to the Democratic clubs coming together, holding space for this important conversation. So really appreciate that. So I'm a native San Franciscan, born in San Francisco General Hospital, grew up in the Fillmore my youth, in Lakeview my middle years, and then back to Fillmore. And what I experienced almost from the very beginning was a tale of two cities, where there was significant wealth and opportunity for many and not enough for Black folks. And while early on I couldn't explain it, I was too young to appreciate the dynamics, but as I got older, my mother began to explain, I became painfully aware of these realities. I want to go back to something that Otis talked about, which is the origin of this country. And so when we talk about the 240 plus years of slavery and the 90 years of Jim Crow and Black codes and the 60 years of separate but equal and the 35 years of racist housing policy, this resulted in literally the destruction of black bodies, black properties, black communities across this country, including San Francisco. And so part of what took place in San Francisco, it's also important to keep in mind that the Harlem of the West was certainly this wonderful hub of central black San Francisco. It's also important to keep in mind it was the only place they could go. It wasn't as if they chose the best part of the city and said, hey, let's create a hub of black culture that thrives. It was the only place they were allowed to go. They couldn't stay in other hotels, they couldn't visit other clubs, they couldn't start businesses in other communities. It was the only place. And so taking on this opportunity to work with what they had, as sometimes, my mother would say, making, lemonade out of lemons, they did that, and then it was destroyed. Destroyed. For no other reason than they did it. And what you see across this country, and I promise to come back to San Francisco, is that same scenario played over and over and over. You heard Tom talk about the role of eminent domain, right, across this country. It's a playbook. And when you go back to its origin, the origin of this country was to establish and to sustain white supremacy, white wealth, and white power. That was its origin. I'm not at all suggesting that today, therefore, every white person holds that same perspective, but let's understand the origin, what the intents were, and those were the intents. And so we've seen the anti-black and the anti-indigenous posture played out over and over and over. And so as we have held this work here in San Francisco, so just a quick history piece of it, well, not history, but here's how we got here. Similarly, 2020, George Floyd's murder, then President Shamon Walton authors legislation to create the San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee. That committee is made up of individuals with some combination of expertise and or lived experiences, i.e. homelessness, formerly incarcerated, discrimination in the workplace, etc. That made up our committee. We then determined to kind of divide ourselves, our focus amongst 4 issue areas: economic empowerment, education, health, and public policy. And our charge was similar to the California task force charge, albeit our focus was on the harms perpetrated by the city and county of San Francisco. So for those wondering, there is a case to be made for a San Francisco Reparations Committee, a California Reparations Committee, and a federal Reparations Committee. Because each jurisdiction has liability, right, for harms perpetrated on black folks in our case, California. And so our charge then was to chronicle the harms, identify the recommendations that we believe would redress or repair those harms, and the result was our final report that we presented formally to the Board of Supervisors back on the 19th, a couple of weeks ago, 19th of September. And now we are in the process of engaging, as is similar with the state, with our legislators to determine what will be embraced, what will be implemented, and that's the where we are in this movie and saga.
We're going to get to how does it become a reality. Y'all have some work to do with that, but Mr. Taylor, it's just weird not just having a hour-long conversation when I'm on deadline and trying to get a column published. But when you came in today, we immediately talked about recent polling, and I want to just read some numbers since we're going to talk about numbers. So UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies released a poll, and basically the headline, shout out to the media, was that voters overwhelmingly, I think it was 59% opposed cash payments. I want you to talk about 1 second what, the converse of that, but then also in that poll, it found of 6,000 registered voters, just 27% feel the legacy of enslavement has impacted Black people a great deal. Now, my question is, you made a point about the 41% in that, but then also, why don't people know more about this? And I'm asking because I think it's a political question, because there is something to be gained to suppress this notion of reparation, to suppress the freedom of Black bodies. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thank the Democratic clubs for organizing this. I've been on panel with Chair McDonald multiple times, and I enjoy each time being with him. We have another committee member here to our left, Chair Member Gloria Berry over to our left, so we want to recognize her. And I want to tell Brother Don, he doesn't know me as much. If he's seen me, let me explain, that I have shown my classes for the last 10 years the case of Korematsu, USA. And I love throwing out the term coram nobis to my students because I learned it in the documentary, which means to fix the error before us. And that's what they did in the state of California. They fixed the error before before the courts of California, not the U.S. Supreme Court. But their approach was is that a Latin concept of coram nobis? A Latin concept known as coram nobis, which means to fix the error. And so being on the panel with him is profound to me because I've only seen him in the documentary I've shown for the last 10 years. And so I'm just excited to be here. And Brother Otis, as he said, we've talked a lot over many years. But I just want to ask you to think about something that it will take 98 years from this year. And everybody here is dead and gone. 98 years from 2023 for Black America to finally have been free in this land for as long as they were in chains. Almost 100 years from now. But then people often ask, and they kind of going back to Brother Don's comments, they talk about how long ago it was, and I say, no, it's not how long ago, let's talk about how long it was. So, blacks have been free, technically, even though we know that's a bunch of asterisks on it, since 1865. If you do the math to 2023, you'll see we need another 78 years to have been free in America for as long as our ancestors were in chains. And my grandfather's father had a father who was a slave. So how do I ever get rich? How do I ever get middle class if my inheritance was my grandfather's father's slavery? My grandfather died in 1965. I was a baby. I held his hands. I touched my ancestor whose father had a father who was a slave. Harriet Tubman and Ronald Reagan lived in America at the same time. That's how long ago it was. And it's really, I'm so glad Brother Don addressed a lot of these what about questions, because like the marriage equality and the gay movement, I've watched them a lot since I've been giving political analysis here, and I find their political example of fighting at the local level, much like the cannabis issue, fighting at the local level, enforcing the issue nationally. But also, the gay community no longer answers stupid questions. It no longer answers, is it moral, or is it, what was the questions in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s? Is it moral? The gay movement has moved beyond that question of morality into transgender revolution. Well, they're far beyond the old questions of the 70s. And that is an example of what we have to do, and what I think we finally have reached through the work that has been done at both levels, is we've documented, and the argument is over. There's no argument against reparations unless you're just an overt racist. That's right. If you disagree with reparations, you gotta be a racist. You cannot have a general opinion against reparations, because we've answered every question you could possibly ask. 1,200 pages at the state level. How many we do? 152 recommendations and a couple hundred pages at our level. Corey Bush in Missouri just put together a $13 trillion package. John Conyers and now Sheila Jackson Lee have been nursing the idea of studying HR 40 for over 40 years, trying to get us just to study the impact of of slavery on whites and blacks, because James Baldwin documented well the evil that racism is, not in black people as a whole. And he always talked about who is the end in America. The one who is the end is the one who invented the end in their own imagination. And he and our sister, the writer, the great writer, I don't know why I'm blanking on the name. Who? Thank you. Toni Morrison, thank you. That's why I'm getting old. Toni Morrison.
You got that.
Toni Morrison, you know, she talked about it, you know, the way in which African Americans have suffered so much, but they knew they were spiritually a deeper people. She knew she was better, and her father said he knew he was better than all the racism that happened to them. On a daily basis, just the ordinary racism that we aren't even enumerating in any of our plans. Think about this. How many of you remember Bill Russell? The San Francisco legend, USF legend? Google his wiki page. And you'll see that his father on one day was trying to get gas. And a white man was parked in front of him. And because he decided not to get gas, a white man walks up to him, put a gun to his head, and said, "Nigga, if you move, I'll blow your head off." That's Bill Russell's father. That's the ordinary racism that is not in these reports. Right. Shirley Sherrod. Do y'all remember the black woman who got fired by Obama on the freeway when she was trying to help white farmers, and Fox made it look like she was a racist, and Obama fired her on the freeway? Yeah. Her daddy got shot in the face trying to vote at the city hall doorsteps. Shirley Sherrod. On and on. I'll shut up real quick. On and on, the quotidian brutality. That's why I was welling up here, because the things we have been through, you just don't understand what it does to us. We are tired. We are tired of being black in America, and not in the sense of political, but we're tired of being your ends. And the only way we're not going to be your ends anymore is if we get the reparations we're working for. If you want to fix Tenderloin, reparations. If you want these kids to stop robbing you at your stores, shutting down your whole city, reparations. You disinvest. You said no to affirmative action twice. You said no to Prop 13 twice. And now you're saying no to reparations. How in the hell do you still believe what your great-great-great-grandfather believed about reparations in 2023? I asked the audience that the other day. How is it that in 2023, you have the same position as open racists from the 1860s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and now in the 20s, you got the same position as your great-granddaddy did. And I got the same position as my great-granddaddy, because he believed in reparations. So I don't have to hide. I can say aloud, my grandfather believed in reparations. Can you? And now ask yourself, can you say, I believe in reparations because I'm nothing like my grandfather? That's the question for white America today. Black people have made the case. Randall Robinson made it in the book The Debt. Ta-Nehisi Coates made it in the case of reparations. But going back to the 1890s, Callie House made it in the 1890s and successfully sued the U.S. Treasury for $68 million for about 7 years of slavery. She had a following of 300,000 followers in Memphis, Tennessee, far more than Martin Luther King. Callie House, the federal government took all the cotton from the Confederacy and taxed it and gave it to the Union veterans and their families. And Callie House said, no, we picked the cotton. That's ours. That should be for our reparations. And that's the beginning of reparations. I'll shut up after this. Reparations was the first black politics. And you all got us twisted with integration. Reparations, when they asked blacks what they wanted 40 acres and a mule, and they said, we'll till this land ourselves. If you study what happened to Tulsa, Oklahoma, after the destruction of Tulsa, they rebuilt it. Do you hear me, everybody? Black folk rebuilt Black Wall Street that was destroyed by racism, and then integration destroyed Black Wall Street.
Yes, it did. Is that an angry black man?
A highly informed one.
But this is how the media would portray someone who's speaking passionately about what his ancestors and he himself has experienced. I want to get to the audience questions, but Bruce, I've tried to distill your questions that you sent for Top Line, and I think someone like myself who is a noted cynic, and a minute for you, Don and Eric, what has to occur for reparations to become a reality?
1 minute's worth. So basically, it's a black issue, has to be black-led, but it also has to be an American issue of justice. And if you poll the American public about Japanese American redress and reparations, and there is no equivalent between 4 years in a concentration camp and 400 years of oppression. But it is one of the few examples in modern history where the government apologized for a great wrong and put some money, behind it in terms of financial atonement. And so if you poll the American public as to was that warranted or not, the answer would have been twofold: no and hell no. That's right. And so basically, this is culmination of a 20-year effort to reach across racial lines in order to move the needle of public opinion. That's a big lift. But I have to say that the public is talking about reparations like never before. So the San Francisco Chronicle full board editorial urging support of reparations. The LA Times full board editorial, 2 of them, supporting reparations and also asking the public to think again if they're skeptical about monetary compensation. And so these discussions are happening big and small all over the place, and not just in California. Still, there needs to be activity on, your part, these clubs, to help move the needle of public opinion, to begin to develop messaging that is a rejoinder, is a response to the most typical opposition points to reparations. And if there's one message I would leave the audience with, and this is a multiracial audience, is to determine the messaging basically that unites everyone on this issue. And when I talk to Japanese American groups who are strongly in support of redress and reparations, I give an historical example of a person by the name of who was shot, because at the same camp that my parents were at, and Fred Korematsu, because James Wakasa, because he walked near the fence line of the concentration camp in Utah, and from 300 yards away, essentially drew down on him, took aim and fired. The bullet struck Wakasa in the chest, killing him. And no inquest was held. Guard was exonerated, claiming Wakasa was trying to escape. And what I tell the Japanese American audiences is 2 years after that, 1945, Odell Short, his family, his wife Helen, his daughter Carol Ann, 9-year-old son Barry, they move into a house they built in Fontana, California. And the sheriff's approach Short and says, go back to your black neighborhood. His real estate agent says, vigilantes had a meeting here last night. If I were you, I'd get my family out of here. 2 weeks later, the house explodes. Neighbors witness Helen try to beat back the flames consuming her children. All family members died. San Bernardino County DA says it was an accident. The California Attorney General concludes no evidence of vigilante activity can be found. So what I ask the audience, my community, what ties these two unrelated events together? And I think the answer is the hate that took the life of James Wakasa and the Odell Short family has an origin. And that origin began in 1619. It is the same values that propped up the institution of slavery. And once you can dehumanize people to that level, then any crime against humanity is going to happen, and of course it did. And Martin Luther King, I think, said it best: if you could thingify human beings, once you can do that, then targeting any other disfavored group du jour is easy. It is easy. And so I used to think about the incarceration of Japanese Americans as just, another example of anti-Asian racism. Now I view it as just a subchapter in a racial pathology that started long before my people ever arrived on these shores. And that origin is 1619, that established this racial hierarchy of a value system that values white people above all others, with black and native people on the bottom, and everybody else, somewhere in between. And what happened in 1941, 1942 is simply where the cannon simply began to turn in our direction. But everybody else can find themselves on that continuum, whether it's immigrants, Jews, Latinos, Native people. And I think that's one unifying concept of reparations. All roads lead to reparations in terms of the origin of where this pathology started from in the first place.
All right, Eric, I want to give 1 minute because I want to get to these audience questions. But what has to happen on a local level in San Francisco to realize reparations?
Fight the power. So it really comes down to the reality that it will take a political movement, a campaign, if you will, to have this happen. There is, number one, 5.5% of the people in the city are not going to run this city, are not going to cause this city to react positively to the issues of reparations. And so we need bold leadership where citizenry across this city, across racial boundaries and lines, across geography of this city, stand up and declare this is true to our core, if that's what we believe, right? This is true to who we declare to be ourselves as the city of St. Francis, and we are committed to having it happen. And therefore, whatever it requires from a legislative and policy and budgetary set of practices, we deem this a priority. For too long, Black folks have not been a priority in any context, right? And so this is the opportunity for our legislators and, most importantly, our citizenry in San Francisco to stand up and say, this is a priority, just like we've prioritized other communities over time, appropriately so. And here is the moment and opportunity for Black San Franciscans.
And I would just add to, the fact that we need events like this that are not primarily to the Black community. I've spoken on a number of events to white audiences, Economic Roundtable of San Francisco. I gave a Kevin Starr lecture recently on reparations, and it was about Martin Luther King and reparations. I'm really glad to hear Brother Don talk about the Japanese community. The Jewish community has been very supportive. Very few people know that when 9/11 happened, the Japanese community was the most rallying community around the Arab and Muslim communities in America and in California because of their own experiences. I think there's been a lot of forgetting. I was teaching my 16-year-old son yesterday about the first Chinatown in America growing out of a place called Nigger Valley in Los Angeles, or Nigger Way, or Negro Way. Look it up, Google it. Google it, it's on Google, and how Black people in LA supported the Chinese community. And just like our ghettos were created, Chinatowns were created out of segregation. But I think there's been a lot of forgetting recently when you see the Chinese community opposing us on affirmative action nationally and in the state and the local politics of San Francisco. I'm gonna tell the truth. You want to know what has to happen. We have to make inroads in the Chinese community. That's right. I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, the Chinese Chamber of Commerce myself the other day to try to get a meeting with them. They asked me to send them an email, and so I'm trying. But I think they need to remember that Black folks supported Japanese reparations, and Takaki, Rose Pack, Yuri Kuchiyama, Grace Lee Boggs, and Don Tamaki, they have all been on the right side of these issues. And I think it's important for people to remember those histories, that Black and brown, Black and yellow, under Black power was also a coalition relationship.
James, while you have the mic, I want to ask you a question about this audience member. Are you going to ensure criminal justice is central to reparations?
I'll tell you real quick. So what really fired me up one day was I was in my class. I teach a class right now called Public Policy Punishment. We look at all the data related to punishment, all these trillions of dollars. And I was in my class teaching one day. We were talking about all these trillions of dollars. Next week, Columbia University came out to Merritt College, brought all of these Bay Area police chiefs, prosecutors, public defenders, and other criminologists and experts together. They set the room up like the United Nations. It was beautiful, blue. Everybody was so impressive. And all these bigwigs were talking all these billions of dollars related to incarcerating our children. And I want you to think about this. We have been more than willing to invest in black people in California in the trillions as long as it was for their underdevelopment and incarceration. Look at Prop 21 on the ballot. Go back and look at how you voted on Prop 21. They put the 9 circles on the ballot so you could see how much it was going to cost to throw your children away, and California said yes. We're willing to spend $5 trillion right now. We've spent, just in fines alone, for every black person who's ever been arrested, forget anything else, just the criminal fines is in the billions of dollars over the past 40 years that have been extracted from black families, independent of every other aspect of criminal justice. Right? So I said in this room full of people, why don't we give every black child born in America $250,000 up front? That's guaranteeing them a middle class start. And you can hear a pin drop, but LaRon Armstrong, the former chief of OPD, is the only one that spoke up. He said, Professor Taylor, all of my experiences with law enforcement in West Oakland had to do with our poverty. Because why? The police police the poor. We have been, I don't know if you agree with this, we've been kind on this committee to SFPD. I've worked on several committees with SFPD. We have not focused on police brutality as one of the injuries, but it must be, because I said in that room, we should include, because I think the old arguments that were dismissible were the ones around slavery. But then there were more modern arguments made by Ta-Nehisi Coates that brought the issue of reparations away from slavery to everything since. But most people don't think about the war on drugs was an actual crime against black America. And it should be declared a crime, and it should be, and the state, although if you look at the only Supreme Court case on reparations in the 1890s, it actually ruled that the state has immunity for slavery. And we can talk about it, it's a case called McAdoo. We can talk about that, but yes.
So he has a point about San Francisco being kind to the police department. So many Bay Area police departments have active scandals where police exhibit racism, where brutalizing black and brown bodies or using language dehumanizing black and brown bodies. Eric, we're a city of many recent immigrants. How do you justify holding us accountable for reparations? 1 minute.
I would say first, the two have nothing to do, two distinct separate points. Right? This is about the harms, the undeniable, the historically factual harms to black people, period. No relationship to other communities, no relationship to whether other communities have experienced harm, no relationship to whether they are themselves do some forms of repair and redress. This stands alone, and I would suggest that the comparative analysis is the wrong analysis. This is not a race to the bottom. This is about history, harm, and redress to black people, period.
We had coffee pastries over in my neighborhood, and this question applies to what we talked about. How do we bring others along with us? Is there an ask for the clubs? How can we link the task forces to spread the word for good?
So there are task force members who are now in the process of forming a statewide coalition in order to support reparations. And we did launch an endorsement campaign. There's near 400 organizations who have signed on, including the Bar Association of San Francisco, the Bar Association of Los Angeles, $2 billion foundations, the Weingart Foundation and the California Wellness Foundation, and numbers of faith organizations. I don't believe there are any Democratic clubs on the endorsement list. So if you Google supportreparations.org, we would love for these clubs to endorse and join that effort. But more than that, there will be an ongoing movement, because the last 2 years of hard work for the California Task Force won't mean anything unless the next 2 years matter, basically. So we absolutely need your help.
We also, if I can jump in real quick, need pressure to be put on the mayor's office. The mayor's been, reserved about this whole issue publicly, and her communications director is here tonight. So I'm hoping we can get, some buzz in her ear because I think it was an article in the paper, the Chronicle this past Sunday, where they wrote an article. Justin Phillips wrote an article about it and what the mayor's potential role could be in helping actually make reparations realized. I think it'd be the greatest part of her legacy. We're looking at Dianne Feinstein's legacy. Well, 40 years from now, reparations on London Breed's legacy would be a powerful return on the support she got from Black people in her community and throughout the community. So I hope she can find a way politically, but again, in order for her to be able to move, she needs other elements of the city to allow her to support reparations. There are elements in the city who would oppose her politically because if she took a position supporting reparations. And I think that's something, there's a political calculus here and a political price for the Democrats, I think, from Biden to Gavin Newsom to London Breed to all of the Democrats nationally going forward, because reparations is not going away. It's a global issue. It's happening everywhere. 14 countries. The Pope has denounced adoption of discovery. New York State just started it. Brown University started it all. Georgetown just gave $25 million the other day. We are winning the argument on reparations globally. And San Francisco is key. In fact, I would argue, Brother Don, I don't know if you agree with this, I would argue that we influence the California committee directly as much as they've influenced us, like lineage and who's qualified. But we've also had some impact on them, going from, I think it was $200,000 to about $1.3 million when we said $5 million, because we would tell them Black America and all of America, we're not playing. And if you think $5 million is ridiculous, Google how many millionaires are in San Francisco. There are more millionaires here than anywhere else on the planet except New York.
We have the money.
In the Bay Area.
The money is here.
Yes.
That's not...
We have to create the political will, and that's what I think has to happen at the community level and at the city hall level.
Yes, and the governor has to be challenged. You can't get all the backslaps signing a piece of paper after a Black man was murdered by police, and then when your task force you created delivers paperwork, you start walking, well, we have to see. I think pressure has to be put on politicians.
Real quick, the new litmus test for every elected. Do you support reparations?
That's right.
Every elected.
That's it.
Every level. That's the question.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Go up to the state legislature and knock on every door. Have you read the report?
30 seconds. The study that UC Berkeley put out, and Stanford, I want to talk about both of them. Stanford shamefully, and it should be embarrassed given the history of Leland Stanford, came out when we mentioned $5 million, and without anybody asking them to, came up with a study to only white San Francisco, not to Asian San Francisco, not to other San Franciscans, just to white San Francisco. It's going to cost each one of your households $800,000. They tried to scare you. They didn't ask Latinos, Asians, how it would impact them. They didn't ask Black folk how it felt to sit back and watch the state create all that white wealth over the past 60 years. Stanford should be ashamed of itself. And then Berkeley comes out, and Stanford was supposed to help us. For the record, just so you know, they originally were supposed to help us, and they came out with that study. I'm going to tell you the tea. And then you see Berkeley comes out with this study last week, and they gave us the highest support ever, anywhere, in any poll, at any time in history, around cash only, without the other 111 or 100 other 75 issues. And guess what the headline was? Most Californians reject cash reparations. And a man like me who was studying reparations in the 80s, in the 90s, when white folk, it was a non-starter conversation. It was like 8% support. Then it went to 13% in the 70s and the 80s, and then about 20% in the 90s. And it's now up to 40%, and you're talking about, I told you we are winning the argument. The fact that 41% of Americans, and again, I want to be clear, am I thinking about reparations? It ain't about white people. It's about, if all of your ancestors are gone, every government and every state that was here the whole time is still here. Alabama's still here. New York is still here. New Jersey's still here. Connecticut's still here, right? Everybody who was here with the crime is still here, and you've been telling us they all gone. But I know it was the state that injured black people, and the state has not gone away. So if your ancestors are gone, the state is still here and should be held accountable.
All right. So we got time for one more question, but this is, I want all three of y'all to respond to this one, because this captures it. So anti-reparationists believe reparations-related policies and actions should be put on a ballot. Now this is big because this is a state that rejected affirmative action overwhelmingly. The question is it fair or equitable for people that have not experienced anti-black harms, hate, discrimination, violence, etc., to vote on reparations? So go start on my left.
Well, I think the UC Berkeley poll study, when you put out a call to question without any context whatsoever, the answer is not surprising. And, we live in a country where half the states suppress history, and the other half that don't suppress history don't necessarily teach it. And so, as I said, I thought I'd do something about American history. And I said in the video, turns out I do next to nothing. I mean, we think we're just learning about Greenwood and Tulsa, 300 people murdered, more in the whole place leveled. And the thing about it, and that's over 100 years ago, but our history is littered with Greenwoods. It happened many times over throughout the country in both southern states and in the north. And so much of that is just not, it's now being documented, but it's certainly not being taught. And more importantly, the issue is being characterized as a slavery question. It is certainly that, but it's everything else that followed. It's also being mischaracterized as almost a singular call for cash compensation. Cash compensation is part of it, but policing, housing, healthcare. I mean, San Francisco has black infant mortality is 5 times the rate of white infants. Things like that. So to put this to a vote without any context is just simply not going to work. And so legislators need to legislate on this one. And the harm was caused by legislation. So it's up to us to provide the people with some courage and political will and backbone to do this. But it's up to our legislators to cogitate over this and create the legislation. So that's my answer.
Eric, what do you think?
This whole effort, I've said since the beginning here in San Francisco, is the equivalent of a court case. The facts speak for themselves. That is, you don't take the facts to the public to see how they feel about the facts, right? That's the misplacement of the facts, right? The fact speaks for themselves, and I agree 100% with God. This is time for legislators to legislate, to lead. It was legislators who helped create where we are today, and it is legislators who should lead us out of this effort based upon the facts that have been presented. 1,100 pages in Sacramento, and another 200 pages here in San Francisco, each of them representing what each body legislatively can do to redress and repair the harms.
It's a trip because
I want to add to this, as someone who studied politics, is that the anti-reparationists trying to put it to a vote?
Yeah,
is that something throughout
history? I was going to say the racism of the question is implied in the question itself. The very question is racist. You don't have an opinion on anybody else's reparations. Why you want to vote on mine?
That's right.
You ain't voted on nobody else's. Indian Gaiman, did you vote on it? You did, and you gave it to him, right? Do you know there are 400 women in California? It might be 4,000 women in California is given reparations to right now, who they sterilize without these women's knowledge. Anybody familiar with that?
Yes.
Women are getting reparations. Did you vote on that? Did you ask to vote on that? Did we in California say, let's put California women who've been sterilized without their knowledge and injured by the state permanently for generations like black people? Did you give an opinion about whether those 400 or 4,000, I'm sorry on the number, I think it might be 4, I'm sorry, it's 4, somebody correct it for me, 4,000, sorry to be accurate. But the point is, you didn't have an opinion about that. You don't have an opinion about Israeli support and reparations. Most of us are supportive of it in the United States as foreign policy, but we don't get an opinion or a vote on it. So you have to ask yourself, why did you even come up with that question? What is the origins of it, except to say, I can't be who I want to be if you as a black man and black woman are free. And that's the real danger. That's what James Baldwin was trying to tell us, that it's not a zero-sum game. It's a win-win. If reparations comes, just like affirmative action, you know who benefits most from affirmative action in America? You know who benefits most from welfare in America? Do you think the gay movement and the gay revolution has benefited from the black revolution going back to the 60s and 70s and King? I gave a speech recently where people are always talking about King like they really liked him, even though he was unloved by blacks and whites in 67. And real quickly, you know, people talk about Martin Luther King fondly. Oh, I love Martin Luther King in The Dream, you know, integration, you roll. And Martin Luther King talks about America bounced a check 4 or 5 times in the I Have a Dream speech before he mentions the dream once. And he said the check that is bounced is what's supposed to fund integration. So you integrate us, but you don't fund us, then you call us niggas because we act like an unfunded people. What you are seeing in your society is the result. And affirmative action, black folk in California, we've thrived, is that the word? Without it, Kamala Harris, London Breed, Karen Bass, look what we've done without your affirmative action. But if you want to be able to go down Market Street, see a different tenderloin, have a different America, if you're tired of this America that we're all seeing fall apart and come apart, exposed more by COVID, the disparities. And that's the final thing I want to add. Everybody fails to remember that the reparations movement came on the tail end of the George Floyd protests, like everyone said, but earlier efforts have been made going back to the 1890s. But more recently, when Bernie Sanders ran his 2 campaigns, Bernie touched on all the key issues about disparity. Now, Bernie never supported reparations, but Bernie openly said black people are on the bottom of every indices that matters in America. And so it seems to me that reparations is the only last step. It's the last, I think it's the last great moment for America. I think it'll be a hallelujah moment for the whole country. I think the streets will be dancing. I think people will feel love. I think America will feel good about itself again. It hasn't done anything beautiful like this. And this is the one thing that can fix this country. Reparations can rid us of the issue of race as we have it right now. It would change the relationship between black people and white people. It would change the relationship between black people and the police. It would change the relationship between black people and capitalism. That's what reparations would do. And it's not a handout. Corey Bush has calculated 13 trillion. Garrity and Mullen, the married couple at Duke University, their book From Here to Equality, they enumerate about 13 to 14 trillion dollars. Reagan's budget cuts took $55 trillion from American middle classes of every race. So that devastation that Bernie was talking about, that came about to 99%, and that when Bank of America, all of a sudden, after George Floyd, Bank of America came out, stationed here in San Francisco, what did they do? We're going to give money to black people. We're going to make it easy. Wells Fargo, we're going to streamline the home owning process. As soon as everybody stopped looking, 3 years later, they're all ducking again. And you can go online and look at the Slavery Disclosure Ordinance, which is at the office of the city manager, is it, or the city administrator?
City administrator.
And see every business in this city who has admitted that it had ties to slavery, and there are hundreds of them. And Bank of America acquired 56 companies that had ties to slavery, and they had to admit it since 2006. So y'all just now getting into reparations. We wrote the Slavery Disclosure Ordinance in 2006 under Gavin Newsom in San Francisco, and it's been in place. So if you go online and look at the SDO, you'll see all of the companies in San Francisco who admit they acquired insurance companies, textiles, banks, assets from the bones and souls of black folk, and they're sitting here watching our communities deteriorate with no plan. How in the hell does Bank of America speak to black America after George Floyd, but it ain't said a damn thing to the black reparations movement in its own city? Where are the banks?
Marketing.
I'm gonna keep calling them out until somebody hears me and it causes some trouble, and Bank of America calls me into an office so we can talk about the check that Martin Luther King said they need to cut.
So we have one last question for call Bruce back, and this is for you, Eric. But you mentioned the sterilization and reparations, which California applauded, said, you know, we're doing this for unlawful sterilizations, forced sterilizations. But guess what California's doing? It's rejecting most of the claims of women who had those procedures done on them. That is why I'm such a cynic.
And California was tracking them down.
No. Check out KQED, October 16th and 17th. I got some stuff running on that because, you know, we gotta call it like we see it. What did San Francisco Board of Supervisors agree to?
Nothing. They said, thank you for all this great work. We think it's really valuable and important.
2 members told us their family members got reparations.
Yes. So we understand, because my family member got reparations. So we understand its importance. And they went nowhere from there. We need action. And so part of what we've said, both collectively, I certainly have one-on-one, office by office, said to each one of them, we need action. No more scapegoating the executive office.
If you have organizations we can come before, invite us. We'll come and talk to your organizations as soon as possible so we can continue to communicate to people outside the community, across the city.
So
I want to talk to the Chinese community. Somebody get me in front of the Chinese community.
I got you.
Hook a brother up.
I want to say thank you all for sitting with us and letting us have real talk with you. I firmly believe that we got to do it so we are all okay. And I want to thank Mr. Tamaki, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Taylor. Inspirations right here for the work that I do, because I'm trying to change how the media talks about race and systemic racism and sexism, xenophobia, all the real stuff. So thank you very much. Bruce, you want to come send us home?
So I just want to take just 1 minute and wrap up. First off, can we give another huge round of applause for our moderator and our panelists, who are amazing. Again, I want to thank everybody here who attended tonight. I hope we set out 8 weeks ago with an objective, and the objective we talked about was getting more educated and informed. And I'm going to raise my hand. I'm more educated and informed now than I was 8 weeks ago, yesterday, before we started. So I hope you all feel that you have information. We definitely had a passionate panel that shared a lot of good information with us, that as we look at all the stories and all the follow-up that's going to happen at the state level, at the San Francisco level with the Board of Supervisors and the executive branch at the mayor's office, there's going to be a lot more discussion. We now know what everybody's talking about, or at least we are better informed. We are better informed. I want to watch my statement there, because y'all have a lot of information about what we know. So thank you so much for Otis. If you could keep, and myself, you've got my email now. Future updates and education and different steps and so on. If you could forward it my way, I'll forward it to our other club presidents, and we'll get it out to our members. so that they could, keep abreast of the issues going forward and get involved as you see fit, right? So, yeah, Otis.
Listen to KQED Forum on Wednesday. Well, they'll be on talking about this. So yes.
Do y'all get voluntary security? I'm gonna need some security.
Okay, again, thank you all so much, and we'll wrap up now. Please follow us, Eastern Neighbors Democratic Club, United Democratic Club, Willie B. Kennedy Club, Alice B. Copeland Democratic Club.